Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lohman, Assistant Head Teacher, and today we're looking at using AI to create resources for dirt time. Just the caveat that we would always give at this point is to just be really careful with your use of AI, to remember privacy policies and to follow the school's privacy policy around use of AI. Anything where you're working with student data, anything with names, just be really, really careful. So, how can we use AI to really help us during that dedicated improvement and reflection time? Well, part of this is about time saving. It's nothing in today's session that is particularly new in terms of the pedagogy, but it's all about saving you time. We want there to be as little gap between a piece of work that's been created by a student and the feedback that they're getting on that piece of work, whether it be verbal, written, or some kind of whole class feedback. The important thing as well with feedback is that we have actionable steps to try and reduce misconceptions, to move students on from their learning, through their learning. And one of the ways that we need to do that is to have really targeted resources, to have a way to make sure that the tasks we're doing during dedicated improvement and reflection time is actually going to help address the problems, the gaps, the issues that particular student is facing or that group of students are facing. So, we call these the sort of high leverage moments in the assessment cycle, the moments where you are going to get the most out of this process of assessment. When you are marking a piece of work, it isn't enough just to maybe pop a number on or perhaps to put some comments onto a student's work. It is far more important, much higher leverage, to actually mark work with an eye on the kind of common misconceptions or the things that you know you're going to need to tackle for that student to move forward in their learning. So marking work and keeping a note of common misconceptions or things that you know you're going to need to tackle or address is really important. Offering students then resources which target those areas is the moment where you're going to be moving them forward. And making sure that we then check again to see that those misconceptions have been addressed or the gaps have been tackled. And that test doesn't need to look like the original assessment. It can be a very different form of assessment. It might even be a sort of verbal response within the classroom, but it's a test to see that that misconception has been tackled. So how can AI help me with these moments? Well, one of the ways that you can use AI is to use a sort of open source resource such as Copilot or ChatGPT and input the information that you want to work with. For example, perhaps those notes that you've made during the marking process, or the type of resource that you want to create, or perhaps the type of test that you want to use once this intervention has happened. And AI can help you with all of these, all of which you are already doing as a teacher, but probably spending hours doing that, gathering resourcing or creating resources to tackle these moments. So one of the ways we can do that is to input into AI really precisely and clear specific prompting with a consideration of what you're actually after is really important. And, let's be polite to our future AI overlords. There's a lot of debate about this. Do we need to be polite to AI? I believe that it's drawing on a whole database that we've created as humans. So perhaps the more polite we are, perhaps the better outcomes for the human race. Who knows? So let's have a look at these clear, specific prompts. Here's an example of a prompt that I could put in after I've marked some work for my Year 10 English class. I've put on this prompt that it's a Year 10 English class in the UK, because obviously for spellings in particular, I'm going to want to make that distinction. But there might also be an element of you wanting to tap into maybe a particular exam board, or perhaps the UK system, if that is your system that you want to tap into. So being as clear as you can on who you're working with for this resource that you want to create. I've put there that they've recently completed a spelling test and they seem to get words wrong if the spellings don't follow commonly known rules, such as I before E except after C. They also struggle with homophones, so I'm being quite general here really. They're struggling with spelling. I've put homophones in, but I've not said exclusively homophones, just generally commonly misspelled words. Can you create a list of these sorts of spellings which I could use with them? At that point, my prompt is not very clear, but I wasn't necessarily 100% sure exactly what I wanted until I saw what was on offer. So this is what I popped into Copilot in this case. We get a very polite response because we've been polite to our AI overlords. And it says, absolutely, I'm happy to help you with that. So I get this list. Now, at this point, I'm looking at the response and I'm thinking, yeah, this is the same sorts of words that I was expecting. But the format, I'm going to have to take that and change that into a format that I can use in the classroom, unless I do further prompting. What I notice here is that the groupings are what the AI has decided to give me back. That I've got the I before E except after C group, I've got the silent letter group, I've got the double consonant group. What I want is a mixed randomised group. So that's what I put in next. Can you randomise these so that there are different challenges all mixed up together, and can you make them all lowercase? Now, there's something about, we call this prompt engineering, making your prompts better, more specific, and to keep going. There's a relentlessness to this process. There's a tenacity to this process. And I think it kind of flies in the face of how we are as humans. Imagine if you emailed somebody and asked them for some help. Perhaps I'd emailed this to my maybe head of English, and I'd said, right, could you help me with a list of spellings? And if she'd sent me the list and I said, yeah, but I don't want it like that, I want it like this, it would feel rude. And there's something about moving yourself beyond the sort of normal confines of politeness and moving into the really specific request, this kind of consumer culture, if you like. You are in control of what the AI will produce back for you in terms of what you ask from it. So the prompt engineering needs to be relentless, tenacious. And over time, I feel that I am getting more and more specific in my first request, but it takes time, it takes a bit of practice. I really recommend sharing prompts with each other so that if you, perhaps a geographer for example, if you know that actually it's really important that you put the specific city or perhaps the particular geographical region, if you're wanting to generate an example of a sort of developing city or something like that. So sharing the way in which you found prompts have been helpful within your subject areas is really, really good practice. So this is what happened. The AI took this randomised list, made this randomised list for me, and they were all in lowercase. Fantastic. However, that is actually not going to be very helpful to me with it all being bullet pointed, because if I wanted to do some testing, I might want to be able to refer to a specific spelling. So I said, right, I actually need them numbered. Could you number them and put them into groups of 10 for me? That might seem really specific, but you'll see what the AI actually did with that prompt. The AI said, sure, here you go. Here are the words. They are now grouped into sets of 10 and they are numbered. And look, they are numbered, but they were numbered continuously. So when we got to group 2, we started at 11 rather than I would want it to be at group 2, number 1. I hadn't asked for that though, so it didn't produce it for me. That's okay, because I'm not being polite in the, I'm not being hesitant, I'm being tenacious, and I'm going to ask for it to be exactly what I want it to be. So I said, could you number each group so that they are 1 to 10 at a time? And there we go, we finally get what I wanted. A randomised list of spellings grouped into numbered groups of 10. I could go further. I could ask for that same set of words to then also be created alphabetically as a separate list that I could use perhaps for another purpose. I could put some of these now into perhaps into an Excel document and have them there as a database for me to work with. I could ask for the AI to perhaps generate some of the tips as to how to remember some of these spellings. I could keep going and keep going, but it's going to rely on my further prompting to make sure that I get the product that I want. It's useful to ask AI, what can you create for me? What could you do with this set of words that would be helpful? Using that kind of more meta prompting of this idea of asking AI what it can do can also be helpful. So in conclusion, we've got a new term here, prompt engineering. It is an exploratory kind of process. It's a process of refinement. It's a process of, whilst we want to be polite, perhaps in our language maybe, but we don't want to be hesitant, and we don't want to be polite in the pragmatic sense of kind of hesitant with our requests. We want to be tenacious. There is a term in AI spheres of the human in the loop. Now, this is more for sort of industry where you've perhaps got AI talking to AI, and the idea that they want to have some kind of human in the loop there to check that nothing, kind of strange is going on. But I think for us, as educators, we're the human in the loop for kind of the product that we get at the end. Are we happy that this is exactly what we want to give to our students? Are we happy that it speaks to the values that we want to promote? Are we happy that it's accurate? Are we happy that it's relevant for this moment in the assessment cycle? Is it going to do what we want it to do? We need to be creative and think about the different ways that we can actually use this generative AI to create things that are perhaps, something we wouldn't set sail to do on our own, but we can do this with the speed of AI. Being tenacious, we've mentioned that, really chipping away like a sculptor with marble. We're really trying to get down to that precise outcome that we want. Once you've got the outcome, you can adapt it. So perhaps you were to go into that and sort of think, right, I'm really happy with what I've got there in terms of the formatting. But now I'm going to use it differently for different groups, and I could use AI for that, but actually I also want to do that a little bit more in a bespoke way for myself. So I'm going to take that product. You can usually just copy straight from the AI, right from what's generated. There are in Copilot, there's a reading pane that you can open, and that shows you a sort of more like a Word document style of response. The Copilot prompts that I've put in are saved. Make sure you're logged in properly for that, so you've got a saved list and log of what you've done, so you can go back and use the outcomes again and again. And as I've mentioned before, sharing of useful prompt templates. What is it that is really helpful information? Maybe the latitude and longitude would be helpful, for example, in geography spheres, and really sharing the way in which you've used AI within that subject specificity is really helpful. So I hope that you found some of this thought-provoking. I hope that you are now eager to switch off this video and go and have a go at your own prompting into AI and see what you come up with. Thanks for listening.